All right. Well, welcome back to Before You Could Buy or Sell a Business podcast. Took a little bit of a break. Was just really, really busy with so many deals that we're working on. So I'm excited to bring this two-part episode to you. So it was so much information. It was so jam-packed that we actually went a little bit longer than our normal ones. So we kind of set it up to be two parts of an episode. So I hope you really enjoy it. And actually to show you how authentic that these searchers were, one of them actually had to step out in the middle of the episode because he had to go handle a customer service issue. So, like I said, you're going to love this one. It's going to be very authentic, and stay tuned for the second part.
And I think it took us a while to be able just to move on. Like, this is not it. Like, this is too hard. This is too complicated. You get excited. You say, okay, this could actually work. Or like, let's see how many different models. And like, it was interesting from a partner dynamic. Pete's a bit more the analyst. I'm a bit more the like, let's just go, like kind of thing, but in different ways. And Pete's analytic skills, though, we ended up and was kind of requiring that we systematize. And I was a bit more, I'm just going to call. Like I don't really. I'm going to call and then move on. I'm calling brokers because it's simple, but it's a numbers game.
Welcome to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast, where we help buyers and sellers learn more about the acquisition process, discuss recent transactions, and stay up to date on the latest news in the market. Here's your host, Garrett Johnson.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast. I'm really excited today. I've got two, well, I guess we could call you searchers. So sometimes, that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm excited to kind of hear your story and how you got into it. So maybe tell us your name and let's go over where you grew up.
So my name is Peter Hucal. I was born in the United States, Lake Forest, Illinois, but I grew up in Canada, actually. My family moved to Canada when I was about 6 years old. I grew up in Toronto. Went to the Royal Military College of Canada, which is kind of the equivalent of West Point, but in Canada. I was a civil engineer and an engineering officer in the Canadian Army. Post the military, I worked in oil and gas and gold mining, and first starting as an engineer and then kind of progressing more into project management and eventually into kind of like corporate development, M&A. I worked pretty internationally. I worked in Africa quite a bit, West Africa, Mauritania, Alaska, Spain, and Nevada. Went to Wharton, where I met Garrett while I was at Wharton. During my summer, I worked a summer in private equity in New York City in mining. And then I actually took a year off during my MBA to kind of help a buddy co-found a property technology startup in Florida. And that's where I kind of really got that entrepreneurial edge and figured out that I had at least a little bit of a knack for it. And then when I went back to Wharton, for my last semester, that's when I learned about the concept of ETA and search. I fell in love with it and then pursued the path, and here we are today. I'll leave it off to Garrett.
Yeah, so also kind of similar, I think one of the areas that we connected on was having put on a lot of different hats and kind of traveled around. So I'm originally from Texas, Jared, so definitely digging your vibe right now. But I grew up there, and then I also spent a lot of time in Peru and Italy, and I was doing a lot of social impact and nonprofit. I started a number of organizations there. Also did kind of a large website that I really grew and got kind of just a whole bunch of different entrepreneurial, but in a non-traditional sense experience. And then I came back to the US after many years, went to Wharton, that's where I met Pete, and jumped into the corporate life for a few years at Boston Consulting Group, and then realized that I kind of missed the entrepreneurial side, being kind of like the first class flights are cool until you realize that you have more life and you can't, you're exhausted. And I think I just missed really working with people. That's kind of where I really kind of felt my heart. And, but anyway, I'm sure we'll get into all that, but that's just the brief version.
Yeah.
Yeah, brief. Yeah. I think we could probably talk 2 hours about your backgrounds, which is great. And I'll tell you like kind of quickly. So maybe I would say about 12 years ago now, maybe like 14 years, we were getting people that were coming to us that were kind of saying, hey, I'm a searcher, I'm a search fund. And I don't even remember if they were saying that, kind of term, but they would say like, hey, I came out of, some Ivy League education and I want to buy a business. my dad's rich friends are going to back me and I'm going to find a business. And at that point, we were doing a lot of like really small deals. Like, so think a mechanic buying an auto repair business. That was a lot of what we were doing at that point. It just was kind of unheard of to do larger transactions. If you would have told me back then that we would do one kind of shaped and structured the way your deal was, I would have laughed and been like, I wish. So it's progressed a long way. But a lot of times what we were hearing from those individuals was, hey, this is what I want to do. But they did not have a background like yours. They went straight through undergrad, straight through their MBA. And then, I felt like they were, 24-year-old kids that said, I want to go buy a $5 million business. So I'm glad that you have such diverse backgrounds, because basically what we told all of them was go do something else, like go get some kind of experience and understand kind of really how business works. And every single one of them that came back 8-9 years later were like, thank you for making me go do that. So I know you guys didn't do that on purpose, because it sounds like you found out about ETA kind of at the tail end of your grad school, which is probably the best time to hear about it. So you didn't drop out at the beginning and want to go chase finding a business, but it's really cool to hear about your backgrounds and everything. So I'm guessing that's kind of how you really discovered, entrepreneurship through acquisition was that last course. So maybe you guys could kind of talk about if you were already thinking about that at all, or I guess kind of when that light bulb went on, and then how you two got together to kind of do it together.
I mean, it's right on the nail. I mean, when I went to Wharton, and I heard about Garrett through the grapevine. I was like, oh, another guy that worked very internationally, worked on the ground with people, and like really emphasized, I would say, like adventure in their like early career. A lot of people at Wharton have great and interesting careers, but like just one that kind of aligned with like what I was thinking when I was in my 20s. And that's primarily why we connected so well. But to your question on like ETA and how we found it, yeah, no, I at first didn't believe it. I was like, this can't be real. Yeah. But it also, not at time, is like, oh, this seems like something I could be good at, and Garrett as well could be good at, like working with people. I mean, I worked in the field with engineers and people from trades. I worked in the military. And it was very much a kind of lead from the front and self-initiative kind of environment. I mean, that's what really attracted me. It was very much like reap what you sow. And that's something I knew that, I could potentially be successful in. Like if you, I'm pretty self-motivated. I can push through it. It's a tough and hard process. I was very painful going through it, looking for a business, and a lot of heartbreak throughout the process. But yeah, no, it just clicked and seemed incredibly interesting to me. But yeah, I'll leave it.
Yeah, I worked really hard to get into a fancy corporate job, and then Peter told me to let it all go. And so I was.
He just was so miserable. We talk all the time, and I was like, this guy his soul is breaking.
Yeah. But it was really helpful the time that on a more formal training I got on the consulting side of things. But something I'll say, and to your point, Jared, on going to do other things. I mean, if you really follow the beaten path, whether it be even if it's an elite or a very successful and ambitious beaten path, it's still the beaten path. And I think not to say that none of those people can be extremely successful in doing this, but I would say it really tests a lot of what happens when there's no path, and that's just whether it be through the search process of where do you start, how do you know you're actually winning, are we losing? Like you start looking, you have 3 things and it's all exciting, and then they all fall apart, and it's Friday at 4 p.m. and it's like, okay, we're 6 months in and we have nothing to say for what we're doing, right? I mean, and then that happens again and again, and it's like, okay, we're just trying different things, and then even when you are acquiring, you start doing, like, okay, it's just us, right? There's no one to tell. I don't have a boss. I don't have a performance review, which in one sense sounds liberating, but it's also, we're just kind of having to figure it out. And then there's, employee springs up a personal drama, there's all just a kind of an unforeseen thing. So I do think that it really tests out kind of the roundedness nature of your personality, and if you can just adapt and kind of lean into that. So there's where I think if you just go down the beaten, again, there's a lot of people that we met at Wharton, they were banking, consulting, And again, they can go into this obviously, but just having a few years of different experiences, I think was helpful for us personally, for at least I'll speak for myself.
Yeah, I think, and you obviously covered it, but I can usually tell as well when I'm talking to somebody, that kind of initial conversation, what have you done and kind of where are you at? And it's interesting. It's like, it's almost like it just kind of clicks for me and I'll be like, okay, they're fine. Like we can do this. Let's go find something. Right. And then there's other people where I'm like, this probably isn't going to work. Both of you were really nice as well. That kind of makes things a little easier on us. As you mentioned, it's not an easy process. So if you add being a jerk on top of that, it's going to make it really difficult. So, it definitely helps with that. So when you got together and kind of said, hey, let's go find a business, did you have, like a meeting? Did you sit down? Did you write down industries that you were interested in? Maybe kind of walk me through like how you kicked off your search.
I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, I mean,
it cringes when he tells us that. Like...
Well, it started, Jared. I got a text from Peter, who was, I think you were thinking about doing consulting or something. Thinking like trying to go back down. And there's just, Peter is like smart, but he like don't put him in a cage kind of thing. And he sends me some text of like, Garrett, I can't do it. I'm going out to the woods. I need to be like Aragorn. I'm going to sacrifice on like the throne of Odin. And I need you. Do you want to go with me? And I'm just like reading this text. And the funny thing is like, there's a part of me that I think is a little like more, I'll follow, like I was just talking about the beat path. If you put it there, I'll kind of follow it. But then there's another part of my personality that's like, screw that. Let's just go. And I'll sacrifice something on the throne of Odin in the woods. Obviously. And so I was like, so I called him back and then we started talking. That was it. But that was, I think I have a screenshot of the text,
Yeah. No, just building out to this. It's a little embarrassing to send a text like that. I'm a little bit of a dork on the side, but it was like that. I was going through, I remember I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. It was my last semester and I was going through like consulting, banking, private, like all the classic stuff. And I was just like, I just like couldn't motivate myself to do it. Like it was, and then like, I was like, you know what? This excites me. I had to listen, to my heart, and I just had to do it. And a lot of then I did like a mental background, like checklist of like, okay, like how can I do this? Like, how am I going to survive without a salary for up to 2 years? How am I going to finance this thing? How this? And then once I kind of got that in line and said like, okay, like this is doable, then I just kind of had faith and went for it, really. I think a lot of it's ego. I think a lot of people are afraid of failure, and you just kind of have to let that go and say like, you know what, worst thing is I tried. But also Garrett and I, my uncle, who's a small business owner and has done really well for himself. I would take Garrett out hunting at my uncle's property in Lancaster, Wisconsin, town of 5,000. Like very small, but my uncle's done very well there. And then just through our like sitting in the hunting shack, we kind of like started hashing out the idea too and introducing it as well. I remember when I first met Garrett, I was like, yeah, we're very aligned. Like values, especially goals, what we want in life. And I remember when I was going to pitch it to him, I was like, I knew deep down he's going to love this in a way because I just know him very well. So it just clicked, honestly.
Yeah.
And,
I will say there on that front, Pete mentioned like the values, like there's a lot of trust.
Oh yeah.
That goes on. There's times when someone's carrying more of the weight. There's times when someone else is carrying more of the weight or more of the risk. Peter started before I did. I was still in my career. We kind of did a setup to cover some of the expenses and things like that. But there's definitely times when each one has carried more of the burden or the risk profile of what's going on. And there has to be a lot of trust that like the cycle will kind of continue. And you just have to know that each one has their backs because you're putting a lot on the line. And I think it's been, every time we've spoken to someone that hasn't done a partnership or kind of adventure, it's rough. I mean, there's some dark days, and there was dark days with us, but we could share it together, and it definitely made it more fun and just bearable. But finding someone that I think you're aligned on how you're gonna run the business, like you mentioned, being nice, like Peter and I, and that may seem cliche or something, but like we actually do want to take care. Like we get excited about giving raises and promotions and like teaching, and we really actually do want, like, that's something we actually want to walk away and look back on. And I mean, we're not trying to squeeze, we're not trying to, I don't know, just get a quick multiple turn and walk away. Like, we're actually like building a community, and whatever someone else wants to do, that's fine. But we were very, I think, pretty aligned on that front, because you're kind of getting into a long-term relationship, really, in one sense. And so I would just say the trust and the values part, if you find that in someone, the partner path is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can absolutely see that. And when about a year ago in November of 23, when the SBA kind of opened up being able to buy less than 100% of the business, like instantly, that was the first thing I thought about. Okay, so if you're going to retain a seller and be a partner with them, you know, it completely changes the dynamic, because I kind of compare it to like, would you get married after the first date? Like, I know people have done it and it's worked, but I would assume that more likely than not, it hasn't. And so being, you know, in a partnership, like you mentioned, I mean, you've got to kind of find some of that balance. And when you find a really good partner, just like in life, and you find a really good partner, it can really elevate things for you. And so, you know, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you brought that up. So did you, you know, having kind of an engineering background and then, you know, consulting, you could almost apply that to everything, which is awesome. Did you immediately say, I want to find something in the mining industry? Did you say, I want to find, you know, your typical HVAC, plumbing, landscape? Like what were you looking for?
No, I think what made us success, because we acquired after about 13 months of searching, which is like, my understanding, a little faster than normal. I think it's because we were completely geographic and industry agnostic. We really did focus on like, what are the qualities that make a good business? Because I think when you go down the small business route, at least for me, I was shocked of how many different industries that I didn't even know existed that are all great business models. So it just so happened that we got an HVAC one, really. I mean, it has great fundamentals to it, which we love, but that's it. I mean, like, when you figure out your investment criteria, which is, you know, relatively, you know, basic, you know, more recurring revenue, less customer concentration, you know, good stable margin, good stable EBITDA, like it's, and then industries that are not cyclical. Like, if you just stick to that and you're open, especially geography wise and on industry, I do think you have a decent high chance of success, because this is what also shocked me when I got on this path was, this is not a finance game. I think a lot of investment bankers, private equity, and like consulting people get in this, and then they think they're going to like create a great model and all these things and create this incredible investment plan and growth plan and all this stuff, how they're going to do this. But in reality, it's super simple. It's like, does it have these 5 basic fundamentals? And do you have a good relationship with the seller? And this is more not in a sales game that you're trying to sell or trick something. It's more of like a relationship game. It's a trust game that you're building with them. Because if you get a good vibe from the seller, like our seller still, even though his contract is done, he still comes in like 3 times a week to help us. And like, it's incredibly helpful. We have a good relationship with him. And that's what's going to mean your success. Not anything that you can model in Excel. It's literally just interpersonal skills.
Yeah, maybe you could go around and explain that to private equity. We'll try not to beat them up too much today, but yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, historically, like I brought up earlier, that you guys are nice, and I can kind of tell when I'm talking to somebody if it works or not. And from doing so many deals and from buying business myself, like I can sit there and usually tell, okay, you've got the personality, you've got the skill, you've got the mindset, you've got the work ethic, you've got, you know, some kind of background that's proven that you can handle multiple different things at a time. And it's really, like you said, it's simple, but at the same time, it's not. It's like you're looking for that person that is actually kind of simple and understands it from a simple standpoint, but you also don't need to go in and complicate things and, you know, make these crazy spreadsheets and all this other stuff. I think you do need to do that stuff. You do need to model it out. You do need to understand what you're buying and how you make money and how you can improve it and everything. But what it really comes down to is you're building relationships. You're trying not to take advantage of people. You're not, you know, pushing a crazy ball up a hill every single day. It's like, it doesn't have to be that difficult. And when you kind of focus on the things like you said, it gets a lot easier and then it gets a lot smoother. So yeah. Thank you for saying that. You said it took about 13 months. Was that 13 months to be done, or 13 months till you started, making offers, LOIs? Like, maybe kind of walk me through like your first LOI to like kind of where you ended up.
Yeah, it was 13 months from officially starting to close.
Like to moving to acquire.
Yeah, to like
signing the contract.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty quick then. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say it was interesting. It was like a logarithmic, or it was like very shallow to start with, like a lot of non-success, looking at deals that were not good, getting overly excited about some, and like just being slow. It took me, for us, like, I don't know, we do like 5 sims a week or something like that. But eventually you get a lot faster, your deal IQ goes up, and you start just pumping through them. So I would say we did get a first LOI in 3 months, but it died a week later. So it wasn't, I would say, a good LOI. So, and then, but after about 6 months, I would say, like, we always had like 1 or 2 under contract at a given time until we closed. I mean, there was a moment where it just kind of clicked.
Yeah. And I'll jump in there, Jared, on the simplicity and the complexity. Like, the criteria are simple, but what that actually means, it's kind of like you can do the knowledge versus wisdom. Like, knowledge is in your head, wisdom, it's like ingrained in your body, usually through some painful experience. I would say there's like the deal knowledge, and there's the deal wisdom, which usually requires some sort of prolonged suffering, or just learning and being wrong. And so, we have those criteria, but like, we spent a lot of time and with deals that weren't going anywhere. And I think it took us a while to be able just to move on. Like, this is not it. Like, this is too hard. This is too complicated. You get excited. You say, okay, this could actually work. Or like, let's see how many different models. And like, it was interesting from a partner dynamic. Pete's a bit more the analyst. I'm a bit more the like, let's just go, like, kind of thing, but in different ways. And Pete's analytic skills, though, we ended up and was kind of requiring that we systematize. And I was a bit more, I'm just going to call. Like, I don't really, I'm going to call and then move on. I'm calling brokers because it's simple, but it's a numbers game. Like, it's ultimately I think I started doing like 20 to 30, 20 calls a day, like, or not 20, maybe 15, like 15, just calling. But Pete would also be like, hey, let's make sure we systematize this.
Like direction.
Yeah,
like
direction and goals. And I'd be like, okay, cool, but we're spending a lot of time on this. Just call the guy and just ask. And then he'd be like, no. And so there was a kind of the back and forth there. But there was a cool part of the partnership of, okay, we're going to get a method and we're going to spend time on this. And we are going to take, I would say we ended up with a kind of a cool tracker and Pete came up with a number of ideas how to have a simple system, but it took us a while for us to figure it out. It was not that easy. I mean, it was a 6 months, 7 months of like refining this. And then anyway, so it took some time to really figure out the deal, I think, intelligence and how to be systematic in a way without wasting time. It wasn't straightforward on that front. It was very easy to waste time.
Yeah, there's a ton of little like tools and stuff we made in the process in terms of like, Garrett's go-getter attitude, just call, but you have to like harness it so you're going somewhere instead of just like wherever. Now, one of the things that we did, I think, was really powerful to our success was every broker we talked to, whether it was a good sim or a bad sim, we wrote down their email, we wrote down their name, we wrote down their phone number, and then we just added to a list. And this list snowballed from like 10 at the beginning to like 500 near the end. And what was cool, and we didn't do it necessarily what a lot of people do, which I don't necessarily agree with, which is just like spam brokers, like thousands. I don't think that works at all. What we do was it took time, but every broker we'd follow up with like every couple of weeks. And we made sure that like when we emailed them, it sounded authentic. We'd bring up like, hey, thanks for sharing this last deal. Like, do you have anything else? And Garrett was great spending a lot of time on the phone with them, because you like building those relationships with brokers is when they're going to actually send you something special.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And I'd say
somebody that works with them all the time, I totally get that.
Yeah. Well, and so part of it was learning to discard early, right? Because you'd have a few things that you thought were really cool, and there's all sorts of like complications and kind of yellow. It's like your first date, and you're like, oh my gosh, she's pretty, and then but then and then you realize there's all these yellow flags. They're like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be totally fine, like she has three other boyfriends at the same time. Like this is totally no issue. Like I'm sure we'll work it out. So let's just let's just model it a few more times. We'll find a scenario where this works. And so at one point you're excited, and so you just have to like, okay, no, we're gonna move on. But it's also like you're planting seeds. You're putting your name, and I don't want to get like a manifestation mindset necessarily, but you're kind of putting your name like Lancaster, like we're putting ourselves out there. And you just have to constantly put yourself out there with the brokers. You have to get to know them. And I think brokers are doing the same calculus as you're doing. Are these people going to build a relationship, or are they just seeing me through an Excel? Because that's who they're going to be. No, we'll probably be able to work with a seller and potentially with a business. So there's a bit of that where there's filtering going on. You have to get past that filter by being able to engage and have kind of a relationship with them. And that doesn't mean you spend hours, but it's like when you talk to them, learn a bit about where they're from, what are they up to, what are they selling, like not just be super transactional. And you do that, you feel like you're wasting time, but over time, there's probably, I would say 40, 50 that, when we called, they kind of knew who we were. And then they would send us deals and all that kind of stuff. So that's when we started to see, I think, a bit more traction. But I'll just go back to the point of like the criteria that Peter said was something, it was like a muscle memory. Like it really, you had to see like, because we would both say, oh, this sim checks out. And I'd be like, no, it doesn't. And he'd say this one. And then I'd say, this one doesn't check out. And he'd be like, yes, it does. And then we'd figure it out. And there was a lot of like discussion on whether this sim actually meets the criteria. It wasn't that clear. I would say, again, a great part of having a partnership is that like there'd be times when I would just discard it in 30 seconds. And Pete's like, did you discard this sim? Yeah. Like, why? And I'm like, oh, because it had this. And I'm like, did you look at footnote 2? I'm like, oh, screw that up. And so there was just like, anyway, I just want to reiterate that like the incarnation of where these criteria and how they actually take place in reality is an art that takes time. You got to be patient with yourself.
And I really liked how Garrett put that. It's like the knowledge, like, it's right, these are the criteria, but then there's the wisdom. And the wisdom does, unfortunately, take a lot of pain and suffering. And there's a lot of, wisdom is one of those things that you can't really obtain any other way. And that's the name of search, is just, you just got to put yourself out there. You got to take every punch, roll with it. And then you learn, and then just keep your ego to the side.
What I'd say what I saw in Peter at the beginning was that he'll run through a wall as many times as it takes to do it. And I kind of had the same. And honestly, that's it. Like, and there could be some times where like, hey, maybe we don't need to run through the wall. But no, you just have to run through the wall because you have to go for it constantly. Like you have to be able to get a little excited about a deal, and you have to try to find a way to make it work and then be crushed, or if they say no, so you kind of have to lean in and say, I'm going to fail about 200 times here, but it only needs to work once.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being authentic, because I feel like there's a big group, and I feel like it's calmed down a little bit, but over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of people, especially on Twitter or X, whatever it is this week. Like there's so many people that are like, you can just go search and buy a business and it's super easy. And, you just have investors come out of nowhere that give you money, and SBA loans are really fun and super easy. And it's like, I'm like, stop, like be authentic, be real. Tell me what sucks about it. Tell me how hard it is to run a business, like all these things. And so many people they just keep like making it sound easy. And you brought up, the relationship side and the dating side, which is absolutely like how I've always compared it. And what I think I see happen often is somebody will come to me at the beginning, hey, I'm a new searcher, so-and-so recommended I reach out to you, and I'll kind of talk to them, talk about how it all works, how SBA loans work, all that good stuff. They'll start sending me Sims, and then they might go away for a little bit, but they'll tell me, okay, I'm looking for this type of criteria, and this is how much I want to spend, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like 8 months later, 9 months later, they're sending me this like total junk deal that like doesn't work, has like nothing inside this box that they started with. And I'm like, I have to kind of call them out. Like, what are you doing? Why are you buying this? This deal sucks. Like, I'm not going to finance it, first of all. Second of all, I forbid you from buying it. It's junk. Like, what are you doing? And then I have to have a conversation with them. And I say to them, just because all your friends are getting married doesn't mean you pick up the next girl that you meet and marry her. Like, that's not how it works. And they kind of like go, oh, okay, you're right. And then I feel like a lot of them at that point, they either get back on track or they say, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
It's actually harder than it seems. But nobody really makes it that far on Twitter. So it's like everybody talks about how easy it is and it takes 10 minutes and you find a business, and it's like, no, a year later, most people are still grinding it out and trying really hard to stay within their thesis or, at least trying to have some kind of guardrails. And I mean, you talk about going through Sims, it's like, okay, this one looks good. Let's move forward. And then you get the financials. Okay, they don't match. Done. Move on to the next one. It's like these levels of like trying to get to the end, and you have to keep unlocking these doors and then finally get there. So yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that about like these Instagram posts. And there was like one that came out and it was like a 10-step to buy a business. And like 5 or 6 of my friends sent it to me and be like, is it really that easy? Like, can I go do it? And I was like, literally, Jared, one of the ones that made me laugh the most was like, once you have a business under LOI that you negotiated for like 2.15x, and I was like, it's like, go to your local bank with your 3 statements, go to the lender, and then get like your debt. And I was like, well, what about the other 125 documents that you need to bring?
Yeah.
And the 60 days of due diligence you need to go through with the bank. Like it was just like baffling of how simple they made this process. And It just like, it doesn't do anyone any service. And like, let alone just the path itself to find one. Like, you got to go a year of like everyone thinking that you're insane.
Like you turn down, all these jobs that people would kill for to, stare at papers and talk to brokers every day on the phone.
I literally started dating this girl who's actually now my fiance. Great, amazing woman. But she, it was funny when I first, I give her to her parents. Her parents are hysterical. And when I first met them and I explained to them what I'm doing, they would joke, like, so you're unemployed. And I was like, yeah. So I am unemployed. Yeah, you got me.
Hey, but if you kept him on the hook then, and you still sold her on where you're at, then that'll tell you something.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found this podcast informative and helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss a transaction, please go to www.jarrettwjohnson.com.